HaKadosh Baruch Hu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yom HaShishi B'echol HaShamayim V'orot V'chol Tzevot V'echal Elokim B'yom HaShvi'i Melachto Asher Oso V'yishbot B'yom HaShvi'i Mikol Melachto Asher Oso V'yevorech Elokim Es Yom HaShvi'i V'yikadosh Yisai Ki b'shavas mikol melachto Asher bara Elokim la'asot.
How beautiful. That's Yehuda Green doing Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach's Kiddush, the Friday night Kiddush. I wish I had heard Shlomo Carlebach do a Friday night Kiddush in person. How are you, my holy sisters and brothers? We got a barnstormer of a page tonight. We're going to be doing the whole daf, so we should get right into it. Lots of beautiful teachings on this page. Let's light up the darkness. Oh my gosh. Okay. That beep is going to happen a few more times. I think it means we have to change a battery on one of the on one of the window alarms. Anyway, who is with us as we gather to learn Tainus 11? Such a good page. Stephen in Dover, New Hampshire, John in Sedona, Bill in mid-Missouri, Melissa in Great Neck, Paul in Chicago, Sharon in New Jersey, James in Indianapolis, Nancy in North Carolina, Christo in Lubbock, Lisa in Arlington, Harry says hi from your friend. Hi, Harry. Paul in the Great Northwest, Lucy in Minnesota, Renee in Indiana, Yehuda in Florence, South Carolina, Eliseo in Rosemead, California. Welcome. That's a new name. Harry's in Staten Island, John in Maine, Dorothy in Pottsville, Arkansas, and David in Indiana. Oh, Harry is Chaim. I gotcha. David is in Indiana, USA. Chaim, I met you when you were out here and you came to our minyan, and you're my good friend Menachem's father-in-law. It's great to have you with us. And you're a Cohen. Shandora in the Bronx. Paula loves the beautiful music. Dorothy in Pittsburgh. Jeff had him as a music teacher in LA. Wow, that's so awesome. Francisco in California. Bella in Florida. Over there on the YouTube side, Lynn in North Texas. Welcome, everybody. We've definitely reached a milestone. I keep notes on each day's pages. I used to, like write a lot. It's like a whole page, and then I realized I didn't need to write that much. So the first few notebooks lasted like 3 months each. This one. But I did take notes on every class, and so this one lasted a year, but just today I completed this notebook. That's the fourth one. And I actually forgot to mention it 2 days ago, but there are 2,711 pages in the Babylonian Talmud. The Daf Yomi cycle that we're doing that takes 7.5 years covers 2,711 pages, and we just got through 1/4 of the way there a few days ago. So, we've finished 25% of the Talmud learning together every day. Yasher Koach, my holy sisters and brothers. May you be strengthened to learn much more and to make it to the finish line in, what's 1/4 of 7.5 years? The other 3/4 is when we're going to finish. It's about the year 2027. With God's help, we'll all get there together. Okay. We are on page 11, Daf Yud Aleph. Here in Tractate Tainus, the 10th volume of the Talmud. These are the laws of fast days as they were decreed in ancient Israel when negative circumstances faced the community. Excuse me. particularly drought. And that's why we've been talking quite a bit about rain. From when in the year we mention that God is the one who brings the rain, from when we actually ask for rain in our prayers, until when in the year do we mention that God is the one who causes the rain to fall, and until when in the year we ask God that he should send the rain, etc. Now here we're on Mishnah number 4 in chapter 1. Mishnah number 4 was, well, when do we consider that the rain which we're praying for hasn't come, that the rainy season is late, and we should start thinking about having a fast? And we learned yesterday that, well, first, the prominent individuals, meaning the Torah scholars in the community, they will do individual fasts. They will fast as individuals. They should all do it. And anyone who's considered a Torah scholar, even a student of Torah, should begin that fast when the rains come late. And if they're very late, like on the 1st of Kislev, the rains hasn't come, the Hebrew month of Kislev, so then the court, the Sanhedrin, would declare a communal fast. And then everybody is involved in that fast. These are minor fasts as compared to Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, when we fast for 25 hours. These kinds of fasts are daytime fasts, meaning only during daylight. So even though a day in the Hebrew calendar begins the night before, you can eat dinner the night before, you can eat breakfast really early while it's still night. But once it's daytime, no eating. However, you can work, you can engage in conjugal relations, etc. It's not like a major fast. But on this subject of conjugal relations, there's going to be some exceptions carved out for that, as we shall see. Oh man, that is going to drive me bananas. We'll try to ignore it. Okay. Where am I? So, just yesterday, what we were discussing as the page ended, as page 10 ended, were, who are these individuals who should fast, and what manner of fasting should they engage in versus the fasts of the community. We pick it up at the bottom of the B side of page 10. Rav Yehuda said that Rabbi Chia said, one who is walking along the road should not eat more each day than he would normally eat each day in a year of famine. Why are we talking about sages walking along the road, or people walking along the road? Because in defining who is an individual, a prominent individual who should engage in those individual fasts, we looked at some scriptural references when Joseph charged his brothers that as they're going back to Israel during the great famine of the world, when Joseph was viceroy in Egypt, and he told them, don't get lost along the way, or don't engage in trouble along the way. And the sages interpreted, don't get involved in disputes along the way. What kind of disputes? Disputes on Torah matters, because you should, definitely be careful to maintain the peace between you and your traveling companions. So now we're talking about on the subject of being on the road. So Rav Yehuda said that Rabbi Chia said one who is walking along the road should not eat more each day than he would normally eat in a year of famine. So how much are you eating during a year of famine? So presumably the minimum, right? I mean, since the whole world is starving during a famine, or your whole nation is starving, you're going to eat just very little, enough to keep you going. And that's how you should actually be eating when you're traveling, says Rav Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Chia. So the Gemara asks, what is the reason for this? You're not in a famine, you're just traveling. Why should you eat so little? Well, here in Babylonia, so these are the Amoraim, the sages of the Talmud, discussing in the Babylonian Jewish community, saying here in Babylonia, they interpreted that the reason is due to one's bowels. Since the exertion of traveling can damage full bowels, it is preferable to eat less than the normal amount when you're traveling. In the West, meaning in the land of Israel, they say that the reason is due to food, i.e., if one eats too much, his food may not last the entire journey. Very practical advice. And therefore, he should ration his meals. And the Gemara asks, what is the practical difference between these two opinions? And the Gemara answers, the practical difference between them is in a case where he is sitting in a boat. He's traveling, but he's sitting down. Now, that's the manner that we travel these days. In ancient times, if people traveled, mostly they were walking. If they were wealthy, maybe they would ride a donkey. Very wealthy, maybe they would ride in a wagon, but most people walked. And so that's what the advice was given. But if you were traveling in a boat, meaning that you were sitting most of the time that you were traveling, so then the traveler must be concerned about his food supply. He could run out of food before the boat reaches port, but he need not worry that the jostling of walking on the road might force him to exert himself, which has a tendency to cause digestive problems. They're not discussing, well, what if the boat is tossing and turning and you're getting seasick? That's a different issue. So alternatively, the practical difference is in a case where he is traveling from station to station. Here he's walking, but he doesn't have to be concerned that he's going to run out of food because he's going from one place to another where he could easily resupply his food supply. So if the reason that you should eat little when you travel is because your bowels will be upset, well, then that won't matter so much because you're walking. That won't matter so much if you're sitting. But if the reason that we should eat little is to ration our food, that won't matter so much if we can easily resupply along the road. The Gemara relates that when Rav Papa traveled along each and every parasang, which is about 4 kilometers, excuse me. The Gemara relates that when Rav Papa traveled along each and every parasang, about 4 kilometers, he would eat 1 loaf of bread. Now, Rav Papa did so because he maintained that the prohibition was actually due to the bowels, not that you might run out of food. And as he was healthy, he was not concerned that travel by road would irritate his digestion. So here we see that this is practical advice that the sages are offering. If you have a delicate digestion, so when you're going to do activities like traveling or anything else that it could cause you digestive issues, eat less. Be smart. Eat less. Rav Yehuda said that Rav said, anyone who has food for himself but nevertheless starves himself in years of famine will be saved from an unusual death. As it is stated, Job 5:20, in famine he will redeem you from death. And this is derived from the precise wording of the verse. According to its straightforward meaning, instead of in famine, it should have said from famine, as one is delivered from famine. Rather, this is what the verse is saying. As a reward for starving himself in years of famine, Job will be saved from an unusual death. So what is being taught here, now we're going to get deeper into it, is this idea that, well, let's say there's a famine going on. So if there's a famine, okay, a lot of people who are, more food insecure are going to be suffering, going hungry, and really enduring the distress of the community. Now, a wealthy person, he might have a big storeroom in his house filled with food, and he can afford to buy it even as the prices go up, because food, of course, gets much more expensive during a famine. So the rich person has no reason to go hungry in terms of access to food. He has access to food. Nevertheless, he should reduce his eating and join in the distress of the community, because we understand that a famine, in the land of Israel, in ancient times at least, was some kind of a holy warning and a holy punishment, because the community, the nation of Israel, had sunk in its spiritual level. Something was wrong. The behavior of the people was bad. That's why the famine was going on. So even if you have the means to eat well when the rest of the community is enduring that famine, you should join in the community and reduce your eating and eat as if you are like everybody else and you're going hungry. You need to go hungrier at least. You don't have to starve yourself to death. No one should. But you should join in the distress of the community. And similarly, Reish Lakish said, it is prohibited for a person to have conjugal relations in years of famine, so that children, one reason is so that children not be born during these difficult years. As it is stated, and to Joseph were born 2 sons before the year of famine came, and then he didn't have any more sons. And it was taught in a baraisa, nevertheless, those without children may have marital relations in years of famine, as they must strive to fulfill the mitzvah to be fruitful and multiply, right? It is a mitzvah, it's a commandment to reproduce if it's at all possible for you. So if you don't have any kids, you should be trying to have kids according to this teaching, even in years of famine. However, if you've already fulfilled that mitzvah, according to Beis Hillel, because you had at least a boy and a girl, according to Beis Shammai, because you had 2 boys, if you've done that, then you shouldn't have conjugal relations at all during the years of famine, not because you're joining in the distress of the community, but because you shouldn't add children to the world who could be born into a time of great hunger, and then the babies might be hungry. Likewise, the sages taught in a baraisa, when the Jewish people is immersed in distress, and one of them separates himself from the community and does not share their suffering, the 2 ministering angels who accompany a person come and place their hands on his head as though he was an offering. That's smicha, right? When the temple is standing and we're going to bring an offering up on the altar, before the offering is brought, the owner puts his hands or her hands on the animal that's going to be an offering. And so here, this person who separates himself from the distress of the community, well, the community's suffering, but I don't have to suffer. In that case, the 2 angels that accompany every person put their hands on that person's head as though he was an offering, and the angels say, "This man, so-and-so, who has separated himself from the community, let him not see the consolation of the community." And a similar idea is taught in another baraisa. When the community is immersed in suffering, a person may not say, "Well, I will go to my home and I will eat and drink, and peace be upon you, my soul." And if he does so, the verse says about him, "And behold, joy and gladness, slaying oxen and killing sheep, eating flesh and drinking wine. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we shall die." Isaiah 22:13. And the prophecy continues with what is written afterward in the following verse, "And the Lord of hosts revealed himself in my ears. Surely this iniquity shall not be expiated by you until you die." You separate yourself from the community, especially a community that is suffering, at your peril. The Baraisa comments, up to this point is the attribute of middling people who merely exclude themselves from the suffering of the community. However, with regard to the attribute of wicked people, what is written about those who hope for more of these days? Right? Who hope for more of these days. In other words, everyone is suffering, and some people feel like, oh, well, they can benefit from the suffering of others, and there should be more days like this. What is written about them? "Come, I will fetch wine, and we will fill ourselves with strong drink, and tomorrow shall be as this day, and much more abundant." Isaiah 56:12. And what is written afterward? "The righteous perishes, and no man lays it to heart, and godly men are taken away, none considering that the righteous is taken away from the evil to come." And this verse teaches that righteous people suffer an early death to prevent them from witnessing the great harm that will befall these other evil people. And when I first read that, it's like, what? Well, why should the righteous die early so that they don't see the harm that's going to befall the wicked? They should live to see that the wicked are punished. But perhaps what it means is, no, but these wicked people will bring even greater harm onto the community. And so the righteous who died sooner at least didn't live to see that terrible conflagration that's coming in the wake of this evil. And the Baraisa continues, rather, a person should be distressed together with the community. And as we found with Moses, our teacher, that he was distressed together with the community, as it is stated during the war with Amalek, Exodus 17:12. But Moses' hands were heavy, and they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat upon it. Right. So this is during that episode when Amalek attacked the Jewish people as we were leaving slavery in Egypt. And this nation of Amalek, who's considered so evil that their name should be blotted out of existence, and only remembered when we read the Torah and for a curse. And what did they do? They didn't even have a frontal war with the Jewish people. They attacked the old, the elderly, the infirm, and the women and children in the back of the line. And then we had to go to war with them. And so Joshua led the attack on them. And then Moses, had two people next to him. And because it seemed like when Moses' arms were lifted up to heaven, then the army was prevailing over Amalek. And when his arms tired, Amalek would prevail over us. Why? Is it some kind of magical power that Moses' arms had? No, we covered a few weeks ago the idea that when the people would look to Moses, they would know, that Moses was interceding with them on their behalf with God and praying for them, and that gave them courage. And then they did better in the warriors who were fighting against Amalek. But Moses couldn't keep his arms up so long. So what did they do? They sat him down and they helped lift his arms up. What did he sit on? He sat on a rock. And so asked the Gemara, but what? Did Moses not have a pillow or a cushion to sit upon? This was a huge elaborate encampment. Everyone had a tent. Inside the tent, they had floor coverings and cushions to sit on. Surely they could have found a pillow for Moses to sit on. Why was he forced to sit on a rock? Rather, Moses said as follows: since the Jewish people are immersed in suffering, they're at war right now, I too will be with them in suffering as much as I am able, although I am not participating in the fighting directly, and so I will sit not in comfort on a cushion, but rather on a rock. And the Baraisa adds, and anyone who is distressed together with the community will merit to see the consolation of the community. They will merit to see when good times return and the salvation of God reaches the people, right? Whether it's in this world or in the next world, but one who is distressed along with the community will merit to see the consolation of the community. And the Baraisa further states, unless a person say, I have acted in secret, who will testify against me on the day of judgment? And the Tana, the rabbi of the sage of the Mishna, explains that, or of this Baraisa, that the stones of a person's house and the beams of a person's house will testify against him, as it is stated, for a stone shall cry out from the wall, and a beam out of the timber shall answer it. That's Habakkuk 2:11. And in the school of Rabbi Shela, they said, the two ministering angels who accompany a person will testify against him, as it is stated, for he will give his angels charge over you to keep you in all your ways. Psalm 91:11. Now, this whole teaching is a little bit curious in the sense that we know that God, who is unlimited and infinite, and we've read before that there's a ledger kept in heaven with all of our deeds written in it. So who is going to need to testify against us? Well, a person is not convicted, except by the testimony of two witnesses. So if God is the judge, then God does not act as the witnesses also. So who are these witnesses that are going to testify against us for actions that we did completely private? In other words, the whole nation is suffering from a famine. Everyone is starving. So a person, who is wicked is going to remove himself from the distress of the community and at home in private when nobody is looking. He's got his private store of food and he's going to pig out on that. Who is going to testify against him? The beams of his house, the stones of his house, or the two angels that accompany a person everywhere that they go. They will testify against us. And how do we know that there are two angels that accompany us everywhere that we go? Because in Psalm 91 it says, for he will give his angels charge over you to guard you in all your ways. And we actually say that at the Friday night Kiddush. We started tonight, we're working our way through Yehuda Green's album, The Land of Your Soul, and we happen to come tonight to the Friday night Kiddush that Shlomo Carlebach would do, and Yehuda Green was recreating that. But in the Friday night Kiddush, right, we sing Shalom Aleichem, right, so peace be upon you, angels who accompany us, right? We sing Shalom Aleichem Malachei Hasharet, or some people Shalom Aleichem Malachei Hasharet. We sing that song, and at the end of that song, right, where we sing peace unto you, ministering angels, messengers of the Most High, of the Supreme King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. And then we repeat that verse 4 times. Sometimes we sing it each 3 times before we go on to the next one. But we basically repeat that verse, except we change the beginning. Peace unto you, ministering angels. May your coming be in peace, angels of peace. Bless me with peace, angels of peace. And the final one, may your departure be in peace, angels of peace, messengers of the Most High, of the Supreme King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. And then after we finish that song, we say these 2 verses and they go together, but they come from 2 different psalms, right? So, and I always say it in English at our table, even though we sing it in Hebrew, and we, so we sing that last one, right? Says Hem l'shalom malachei hashalom malachei elyon mimelech malachei hamalachim hakadosh baruch hu, for He will give His angels charge over you, guard you in all your ways. He, the Lord, will guard you as you come and as you go, henceforth and forever. So that first one is He will give His angels charge over to guard you in all your ways. That's this line from Psalm 91. And then the second one is for He, the Lord, will guard you as you come and as you go, henceforth and forever. That's from Psalm 121. So I often think, where did they exactly come from? And here it is from Psalm 91 and then from Psalm 121. The point is, those are the proof texts that God guards you in all your ways, but He also appoints these 2 angels to accompany you everywhere you go. So they will guard you if they can. They're your guardian angels, 2 of them. But if you misbehave, they will also testify against you on the day of judgment. Rabbi Hidka said, a person's soul will testify against him. As it is stated, keep the doors of your mouth from her who lies in your bosom. Micah 7:5. And some look to this verse that a man's limbs will testify against him, as it is stated, you are my witnesses, says the Lord, from Isaiah 43. This idea that a person's soul will testify against him, that's rough, because there you see that, you and I are souls. We come from the world of souls. We have bodies in this world. And what you normally call a person, right, what it is a holy soul riding around in this human body with human thoughts and human emotions and human desires, who that very often, doesn't listen to the longing of the soul, but rather just feeds its very human bodily appetites. Poor soul, forced to ride around in this human contraption for a human lifetime. But then when you return to the world of souls, okay, so now the soul is accompanied by this body and all the experiences that the body had during a human lifetime. And the soul is going to be like, oh man, did I have to put up with a lot, this human with all these bodily needs and desires. And the soul, will remember everything that the whole person did and will testify on the day of judgment. So the Baraisa cites another verse that deals with judgment. Now that we're on the subject of judgment, so Deuteronomy 32:4. Who is God? God is a God of faithfulness, without iniquity. He is just and righteous. And what does this verse mean? The Baraisa interprets the first part, a God of faithfulness, to mean that just as punishment is exacted from the wicked in the world to come, even for a light transgression that they commit, so too punishment is exacted from the righteous in this world for a light transgression that they commit. That the righteous suffer their punishment in this world, so they're done with receiving punishment. When they get to the world to come, they're all set to enjoy paradise. The Baraisa goes to the second section of the verse, a God of faithfulness and without iniquity. What does it mean, without iniquity? This teaches that just as reward is paid to the righteous in the world to come, even for a minor mitzvah that they fulfill, so too reward is paid to the wicked in this world, even for a minor mitzvah that they fulfill. to give the wicked all the reward that they deserve for the performance of any commandment that they fulfill, but they get their reward in this world. Once they get to the next world, they don't have any rewards left to enjoy in the world to come. They are going to be punished much more for, they're going to have an experience much more punishing because they had so many transgressions that they need to account for. And with regard to the third section of the verse, he is just and righteous. The Lord is just and righteous. So the sages said, at the hour of a person's departure to his eternal home, all his deeds are enumerated before him and are rendered visible to him once again. And the deeds themselves say to him, you did such and such in such and such a place on such and such a day. And the person says, yes, that is exactly what happened. And they say to him, I guess his deeds say to him, sign a statement that this is correct. And he signs. As it is stated, Job 37:7, he makes the hand, God makes the hand of every man sign. And not only that, but after a person has been shown all his deeds, he justifies the judgment upon himself and says to them, you have judged me well. And this response serves to fulfill that which is stated, Psalm 51:6, that you, God, may be justified when you speak and be right when you judge. Right? When God judges us, it won't be like a questionable outcome. Which way is the verdict going to go? Because there's always incomplete evidence and slanted testimony. And do you have a good prosecutor? And do you have a good defense attorney, etc.? When we reach our time of trial, right, and when we leave this world and we stand behind the heavenly tribunal, all of our deeds from our lifetime will pass before us, right, and testify, this is exactly what you did. The evidence will be completely compelling. God may be merciful, but our trial will be in the face of perfect evidence. Unlike an earthly court, the evidence will be perfect. Everything we've ever done, for good and for bad, will pass before the heavenly tribunal. And of course, the heavenly tribunal will be able to absorb that judgment quickly, and all that evidence quickly. Or maybe not. Or maybe, we'll relive our entire life and now as a witness of everything that we've done, and it will take a long time. We have eternity to deal with it. So I don't know. Will it all the evidence will be presented very fast, or in kind of real time as we lived it here? Wow, and we have to relive everything that we ever did, and then and then in the basis of that evidence, our portion in the world to come will be determined. Now, the Gemara returns to the primary topic of our tractate, the issue of fasting, right? Of fasts being declared. Shmuel said, whoever sits in observance of a fast is called a sinner, as it is inappropriate to take unnecessary suffering upon oneself. Right, so we've been talking about fasts that are decreed because there's a famine or there's a plague or there's some very big negative circumstance that causes fasting to be necessary. Well, what about a person who undertakes to fast without such a requirement? Shmuel said, well, whoever takes on an optional fast, an unnecessary fast, is called a sinner, as it is inappropriate to take unnecessary suffering upon oneself. The Gemara comments, Shmuel holds in accordance with the opinion of the following Tana, a rabbi of the Mishnaic period, as it was taught in a Baraisa. Rabbi Elazar HaKapar, the Great, says, what is the meaning when the verse states with regard to the Nazir, right, the Nazirite, the one who takes on that he will abstain from wine or any products of the grape, and will not cut his hair, right? Like the biblical character Samson was a Nazir. He had taken that vow. So with regard to the Nazir, it says Numbers 6:11, and he will atone for him for that he sinned by the soul, the nefesh. But with what soul did this Nazir sin? Rather, the Nazir sinned by the distress that he caused himself when he abstained from wine in accordance with the terms of his vow. Wine is permitted to a Jew. If he says, I will not drink wine, takes a vow not to drink wine, And usually the Nazarite vow, I mean, there's a structure for taking this vow in the Torah. So how can you say it's a sin to do it? Right? God says this is if you will be a Nazir, this is how you will do it. And when the days of your Naziris end, then you will bring certain offerings. So why would the sages say that he is a sinner who takes on the vow of a Nazir? And are these matters not inferred a fortiori? And if this Nazir, who distressed himself by abstaining only from wine, is nevertheless called a sinner and requires atonement, then with regard to one who distresses himself by abstaining from each and every matter of food and drink when he fasts, all the more so should he be called a sinner. So even the Nazir is referred to as a sinner for taking this optional vow to abstain from wine. All the more so, one who takes on an unnecessary fast, an optional fast from all food and drink, all the more so he should be called a sinner. But then why does the process for becoming a Nazir exist in the Torah? Is it absolutely so that one who takes on a vow to abstain from something, a vow, right? Not just that he says, I'm gonna go on a cleanse, I'm gonna have a healthy fast. That's different. But to take a vow not to have something, and then you're held to the requirements of that vow, the sages look down on it. They don't like it, right? But is there never a time that you should take such a vow? Conversely, Rabbi Elazar says, one who accepts a fast upon himself is called holy. As it is stated, with regard to the Nazir, he shall be holy, he shall be sacred. And he shall let the locks of his hair, he shall let the locks of the hair of his head grow long. So here too, one can apply an a fortiori inference. And if this Nazir who distressed himself by abstaining from only one matter, wine, is nevertheless called sacred, then with regard to one who distresses himself by abstaining from every matter, food and drink, not just wine, all the more so should he be considered sacred. And so the Gemara asks, and according to the opinion of Shmuel, the Nazir is indeed called sacred, as stated by Rabbi Elazar. And the Gemara answers, that verse is referring to the sanctity of the growth of the hair, as the Nazir's hair does possess an element of sanctity, but it does not refer to the Nazir himself. And the Gemara reverses the question. Well, according to the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, the Nazir is called a sinner. And so the Gemara answers, well, that verse refers specifically to a Nazir who rendered himself ritually impure by coming into contact with a dead body. Because the Nazir is supposed to treat himself like a priest, like a Kohen, and not come into contact with a dead body, even for the needs of the body, which is understood to be the greatest mitzvah of all, the true kindness, when you take care of a dead body. But neither a priest nor a Nazir is allowed to come into contact because he's holding himself up to this extra high level of sanctity. The priest is commanded to do that. The Nazir, once he takes on the vow of Naziris, must handle himself in the same way and not come into contact with a dead body. If he does come into contact with a dead body, then he has broken his vow and he is called a sinner for that reason. So we're not sure, is it permitted to fast or not? Is it permitted to become a Nazir or not, according to the opinion of the sages? And so the Gemara asks, and did Rabbi Elazar actually say this? That fasting is a virtuous act and saying that a person is sacred? But didn't Rabbi Elazar himself say a person should always consider himself as though a sacred object is immersed in his bowels, which he may not damage? As it is stated, the sacred is in your midst, and I will not come into the city. Hosea 11:9. And this statement indicates that it is prohibited to take a fast, an unnecessary, an optional fast upon oneself. Therefore, one who does so is not sacred, but is a sinner. And the Gemara answers, La kasha, this is not difficult. The first ruling, that one who fasts is sacred, is referring to a case where he is able to distress himself without causing bodily harm. And if he has a reason to undertake abstaining from food, that self-affliction, if he has a good reason to do it, and he's not going to hurt himself by doing it, okay, so then there's an element of sanctity to it. But that second ruling, that one may not overly burden his body, deals with a situation when he is unable to distress himself while avoiding all harm, and he proceeds to fast nevertheless. If you undertake a fast and it's really going to hurt you, it's going to bring you to the brink of death, like these people who do a, what is that called? Like a person in prison who refuses to eat day after day after day, and they start, whiling away, and they're coming to the brink of death as a form of protest. That's definitely prohibited by Jewish law. And Reish Lakish said, one who fasts is called pious. As it is stated, the pious man does good, gomel, to his own soul. But he who troubles his own flesh is cruel. Proverbs 11:17. So the verb gomel can also mean weaning or abstaining from unnecessary pleasure. So accordingly, Reish Lakish derives from this verse that one who abstains from food is called pious. And similarly, Rav Shesha said, the student of a Torah academy who sits in observance of a fast has let a dog eat his portion. Since his fast weakens him and prevents him from studying Torah, it is considered as though a dog ate his meal, as the student derived no benefit from it. Here they're getting at the idea that, well, if you're weakening yourself by fasting because you think that's going to make you more pious, but in that weakened state, you abstain from doing your commandments like Torah study, so you didn't really gain anything. You didn't increase your level of piety. Rather, you diminish the amount of Torah study that you're doing, and you're a Torah scholar. You're better off not fasting. So Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba said, there is no... All right, so let's just read a little bit about this. Where he is able to distress himself. One who observes a fast, when he is able to do so without causing himself bodily harm, is considered sacred. However, one who does so when he is weak or ill is called a sinner. So this is where the law came out, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. So if you're going to undertake a fast for a pious reason and your body's able to tolerate that, okay, then it's considered sacred. But no matter what your reasoning is for taking on that fast, if it's going to weaken you and make you sick, then you shouldn't do it. And the ruling applies only to one who observes the fast as an act of piety. However, one who knows that he has committed a transgression is required to fast even if he is weak or ill. That's according to the Taz. The authorities associated with the moralistic Musar movement have suggested a variety of alternatives to fasting for those who seek atonement for their sins. And these include refraining from certain foods, refraining from speech, and secluding oneself for private reflection. So this is very interesting. I mean, this is the first time that we've encountered this, right? When the temple was standing and you committed certain kinds of sins, right, and an unintentional transgression, so then you could bring a sin offering when the temple was standing. The temple is no longer standing, so you can't atone for those kinds of sins, unintentional sins that are transgressions of written commandments, negative commandments particularly. So now that you can't bring the sin offering to make up for that, like violating Shabbos unintentionally, so what do? We've talked about that you want to make an atonement. You're going to ask God to forgive you. You're going to pray for forgiveness. You're going to organize yourself so you don't commit that deed again and make a proper teshuvah, make a proper atonement. But we never ran into this idea that fasting could be part of your atonement, let alone that it would be commanded. Now, right away, we're seeing that somebody said you should do a fast as an atonement, but right away there's other voices that disagree with it. So there's nowhere, this idea that you committed a sin and so you must engage in fasting. No, it's not that. But according to these opinions, fasting may be part of an atonement process for some people, especially if the sins were egregious. But also what you might do is abstain from some kind of a pleasure, something that gave you pleasure, and you'll abstain from that as part of your atonement process. But maybe more effective than that will be, sitting in contemplation and really figuring out why you committed that sin, getting to the root of it, so that you'll be able to not commit it in the future, and then taking on practices that will help you avoid that sin in the future. So Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba said, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba said, there are no completely stringent communal fasts in Babylonia, in Bavel, except for Tisha B'Av alone. All other fasts, even those which are fixed and routine for the community, are treated as individual fasts. Obviously, Yom Kippur is like Tisha B'Av in this regard. But all other fasts, even those which are fixed and routine for the community, are treated as individual fasts, with regard to both the customs of the fast itself and the laws of who is obligated to fast. And Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba said that Resh Lakish said, a Torah scholar is not permitted to sit in observance of a fast due to the fact that his fasting reduces his strength for the heavenly service of Torah study and mitzvahs. So now we're a little confused. Didn't we read that the Torah scholars are the ones who undertake individual fasts when a drought is come, or a drought is threatened to come, like the rains are late, right? And so who is the ones who will start the individual fast ahead of the communal fast? Those are the Torah scholars. Now it says Torah scholars may not fast. So what is the law on this? A Torah scholar is not permitted to sit in observance of a fast. Explains Rav Steinsaltz, it is prohibited for a Torah scholar to accept a fast upon himself, as it diminishes his capacity to study Torah. However, if the entire community is fasting, he should do so as well, so as not to separate himself from the community. Whoever spends all his time studying Torah is called a Torah scholar for the purposes of this law, even nowadays. Teachers of school children are also considered Torah scholars, as explicitly stated in the Jerusalem Talmud. So it seems like here what we're talking about is optional fast that somebody might want to take on because he committed a sin, because he wants to rise in sanctity for whatever particular reason. But if we're talking about a response to a negative circumstance that's impacting the community, yeah, the Torah scholars will fast for that, even ahead of the communal fast that's decreed on everybody. And the Mishna taught that during the first set of fasts, they eat and drink from after dark. Now we're talking about where the court decreed that, okay, the whole community is facing a drought, and so we need to, have first these individual fasts, a series of fasts, and then if the rains don't come, a communal fast. And that's done as a series of fasts. We discussed yesterday, that's done Monday, Thursday, Monday. 3 fasts in that sequence, on a Monday, on a Thursday, and on a Monday, daytime fasts. And so the Mishnah taught that during the first set of fasts, they eat and drink from after dark, and then they begin fasting in the morning. And Rabbi Zera said that Rav Huna said, with regard to an individual who took a fast upon himself, even if he ate and drank the entire night, on the following day, he prays in the Amidah the prayer of a fast, which begins, Anenu, answer us on the day of our fast. If after completing his fast, he slept in his fast, i.e. he continued fasting throughout the night, he does not pray the prayer of a fast the next morning. When we're in a fast day, whether it's the kind of fast days that we commemorate now, like the fast of Esther, Tinus Esther, which is related to the Purim story, or a big major fast like Tisha B'Av, during the prayers of that day, we insert the Anenu prayer, also like Tzom Gedalia, the fast of Gedalia, which is on the next day after Rosh Hashanah. So during the prayers of that day, we insert this special prayer, we're fasting, please God, notice that we're fasting, and be merciful with us in recognition of the fact that we're fasting. So you add that prayer to the Amidah, and you also add it to your Amidah prayer if you've taken on an individual fast. That's not a communal fast. So Rav Yosef said, what does Rav Huna maintain in this regard? Does he hold that one does not fast for only a few hours, i.e. that fasts that do not last from daybreak until nightfall are not considered fasts at all, and therefore these extra hours of the night are not part of his fast? Or perhaps he holds that one does fast for a few hours, But one who fasts for a few hours does not pray the prayer of a fast. Can you have a partial fast, just a part of the day? Abaye said to Rav Yosef, actually, Rav Huna holds that one does fast for hours. You can have a partial fast, just a few hours of the day. And one who fasts for a few hours does pray the prayer of a fast. But it is different here, as there are hours of the night that he did not take upon himself at the outset. Right? So the nighttime hours, whether you ate or not, is not really part of your fast when you're talking about these optional fasts or even communal fasts. Since they're not 25-hour fasts, the hours that you fast at night don't really count. And if you start fasting in the afternoon, so that's your partial fast. So the question is the next day, and then you didn't eat that night. So the next day when you do the morning prayers, do you insert that special prayer of fasting? You haven't eaten since the previous day, but the nighttime hours don't count. So while in the afternoon prayer the previous day, you should insert the special prayer of fasting, you would not insert that prayer the next morning. And the Gemara relates on a new subject, Mar Ukva happened to come to the city of Ginzak. And the inhabitants of Ginzak, among other, I'm almost done, and we're almost at the end of the page, and we're doing the whole daf today. So if you have questions or comments, get them in now. So the Gemara relates, Mar Ukva happened to come to the city of Ginzak, and the inhabitants of Ginzak, among other matters, asked him three questions to which he did not know the answer. 1, does one fast for hours, or does one not fast for hours? Meaning, can you have a partial fast just for part of a day? Like just part of the daylight. And Mar Ukva did not have an answer readily available. Second, they asked him, are the clay jars belonging to Gentiles, to non-Jews, which have been used for storing wine, permanently prohibited for Jews to put their wine in, or, kosher wine, or can they be rendered permitted? And he did not have an answer readily available. And the third question, in what garments did Moses serve all 7 days of the inauguration of the Mishkan, the Tabernacle in the desert, as the acting priest when Aaron and his sons were initiated into the priesthood? Thereafter, the priests would always be the descendants of Aaron. But when Aaron himself was initiated, who was the acting priest, the temp priest, who served as the officiant as Aaron was being initiated and his older sons into the priesthood? That was Moses. Well, what did he wear when he was an acting priest? The garments had not been created yet for the priests to wear, for Moses and his son, for Aaron and his sons to wear. So what did Moses wear? That's the question that the citizens of Ginzak put to Mar Ukva, and he did not have an answer readily available. Mar Ukva then went and asked these questions in the study hall. And the sages in the study hall said to him, the law is, number 1, a person can fast for hours, and he even prays the prayer of a fast for this partial fast. And the law is that the jars belonging to Gentiles are permitted to be used by a Jew for their wine after they have not been used at all for 12 months. They have to be out of use for 12 months, and then a Jew could use them. And finally, in what garments did Moses serve during the 7 days of the inauguration of his brother Aaron and Aaron's sons? He did not serve in his own clothes, nor in the regular priestly garments, but in a special white cloak. And Rav Kahana taught Moses served in a white cloak that does not have a hem. And there we finish for today. With God's help, we'll continue tomorrow at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. On Thursday, which is Thanksgiving, we will have class at a special time. It'll be 3 p.m. Pacific. I know lots of people will be eating dinner during that time. Fear not. You can always make up the class afterward. You don't have to catch it live. You should enjoy your dinner. But we will have class on Thanksgiving Day, and it'll be at 3 p.m. Pacific. That's 3 hours earlier than our normal daily time. Okay, let's go to questions and comments. While those are loading up on my screen, I will remind you that we are in our annual campaign. Please support Accidental Talmudists so we can share more Torah with more people. All donations are doubled during this campaign, and thanks to our generous matchers. And it's very important this year, maybe donate more even than you would normally donate, because this is the year, or 2022 is the year that we're going to develop and build, with God's help, the AT app, so that we won't be subject to the algorithms of social media in reaching our own audience, but we'll be able to connect with you directly. It's going to be awesome. We're going to have a lot of functionalities in the app, particularly helpful for our daily class. So please donate to our nonprofit and enable us to share more Torah and to build the AT app. The link is in the description here, but it's donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. The word I was looking for before was a hunger strike. So as we see, a hunger strike is definitely going to hurt the body, not permitted under Jewish law. Heather Riley, do you fast if your health is compromised? No, you do not. Right? If in fact, even Yom Kippur, not only are you permitted to not fast if it would impact your health, you're prohibited to do a full fast if it's going to endanger your health, right? So life is sacred, life above all things. So a person may not have a full fast if it's going to endanger his health. And that is perfectly in keeping with what we're studying today. Nina has a question. If we are not supposed to take on an unnecessary fast, why does my siddur include prayers for people taking on a solo fast? Exactly. And so these are these individual fasts that we're talking about. And so the question is, right, is it sacred to do it, or is it dangerous to do it, or is it a sin even to take on such a fast? And so in the notes, what we see here is, it depends why you're doing it, right? If you're going to take on a fast because, you're trying to rise in sanctity, then it may be permitted as long as it doesn't hurt you. If it's going to hurt you, then you can't do it. But there's also the idea that an individual who's fasting for the needs of the community, right? If there's the drought or the famine, etc., the plague, and a communal fast hasn't been declared yet, but certain individuals can start to fast for the amelioration of this danger to the community. That's one of those cases where it's definitely permitted for individuals to fast. But there's also this idea. Okay, here's another note from Rav Steinsaltz. So the early and later authorities discuss at length the broader issues of the place of fasting and asceticism in Judaism. Tosafos attempt to reconcile the seemingly contradictory Talmudic sources and argue that although one who observes a fast is called a sinner, the righteous deed he performs by fasting outweighs the sin that he commits by voluntarily undergoing bodily suffering. So in other words, if you're just fasting to see if you can do it, not good. If you're doing it just to lose weight, that's not the right way to lose weight. You're doing a cleanse. Well, a cleanse, you don't really fast. The proper cleanse, you are eating and drinking some amounts. That's not fasting, right? A full fast, if you're trying to rise in holiness, so maybe the increase in holiness will outweigh the fact that you're taking on this unnecessary affliction to your body. Other commentators distinguish between a fast observed as an act of penance and one that serves as a means of attaining sanctity. One who fasts for atonement is called a sinner not due to the fast, but due to the transgressions that made the fast necessary. So it's not a sin to fast according to this view. So when he observes the fast, he acts correctly. But this does not transform him into a sacred or pious person. He's just doing it as a penance to make up for his transgressions. By contrast, one who fasts to purify his soul is indeed considered a sacred individual, as his purpose is to reach a state of sanctity and closeness to God. So here's a view that would sort of allow that kind of asceticism. But as we see, it's not a universal view. Yet others argue that one is called a sinner only if he fails to repent for his sins, even after observing his fast. So if one fasts in order to achieve some penance, to make an atonement for transgressions, maybe, and remember, if you transgress against another person, you need to get their forgiveness. You can't just take on a fast yourself. You need to make the atonement with that other person. But for sins against God, okay, so maybe this is part of the process. But if you take on the fast for the sake of penance, and then you go back and commit that sin again, you didn't achieve anything, and now you've added on the extra sin of afflicting your body when it was optional and unnecessary to do so. Rav right? So in addition to the sins he committed in the past, this one who sins again is now guilty of the additional sin of causing his body distress. However, if he sincerely repents, he is certainly considered sacred, as he has thereby purified himself of his sins. So we see that there's definitely multiple and conflicting views on this question. If you are thinking about taking on a fast that is not required of you, I would recommend talking it through with your rabbi. That's what we've got for today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, 6 p.m. Pacific, the regular time. And recall that on Thursday, Thanksgiving, we'll be having this class at 3 p.m. Pacific, 3 hours earlier than normal, with God's help. Have a terrific night. And if you're supporting our annual campaign and getting your donations doubled, we thank you so much for your support. The link is in the description, donate.accidentaltalmudist.org.